time for Pick 6, brought to you by BetMGM. Add a parlay wager, minimum odds of plus 400 to your bet slip. Bet up to the specified max stake and activate your token. If you win your bet with the token applied, you'll score extra winnings on your wager. Now, last week, Coach, we talked about the mighty Hartford Whalers and the NHL and everything that came with hockey right now. This week, Coach, we get back to college football, the top 6 front runners for next season's Heisman Trophy winner. Okay, we're talking Heisman next year. I'm going to give you the top 6 and their numbers in a moment. But number one, what's it like to go into a season coaching a player that you know is a Heisman candidate?
Well, we had it almost every year. You know, it started back at Utah when I had Alex Smith. Did I know Alex was going to be a Heisman? Utah never really had I don't think they had one. I'm sure they didn't. And Alex, as the season started to progress, I started hearing the word Heisman. Matter of fact, I'll go one before that. Josh Harris at Bowling Green, had such a year that people were starting to vote for him for the Heisman. So as a head coach, safety of players is number one, but also getting your best players the ball, I would always say, is number two, but then also making sure that the players get what they deserve, their value. Obviously you got making sure guys are ready for the NFL draft, but also if you have a guy that's what that does for your school, more importantly for that player, you got to make sure that he's getting his stats. For example, J.T. Barrett was a Heisman candidate, I believe, for 2 or 3 years. In one game, I knew we were playing a team that wasn't real good and we were going to beat them. I think he threw for 5 or 6 touchdowns in the first half because I told our coordinator, no runs. We're going to throw the ball every snap because I owe that to that player. I knew we were going to run the ball in the second half to kind of end the game. So I think coaches do a good job. Most coaches do a good job. You got a Heisman candidate. The first job, win the game. Second thing, make sure that player is in the running. And does that impact your play calling? When I had Tebow and when I had some of these other guys, yeah, it did. I wanted in my mind is saying, does he need? I would actually look at the stats on the scoreboard, say how many yards did he throw for, and make sure he's at least in the running for that thing.
Yeah. All right. So again, according to BetMGM, and these lines always change, right, Coach? Here are your early season front runners to win the Heisman. Arch Manning at Texas is plus 700. Quarterback run here. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU plus 850. Go to Clemson. Cade Klubnik sitting there at plus 1,100. Finally, a non-quarterback, Buckeye wideout Jeremiah Smith at plus 1,200. And then from there, we go back to the quarterbacks and back to the Big Ten. Drew Allar at plus 1,300. So here we are hanging out in the early parts of spring, and we're already talking Heisman. Yeah. Who's got the early edge right now? And again, by the way, this is a trophy that is won in November. Yeah. But here we are talking about it in spring because people love talking about the Heisman Trophy, and so do we. Coach, who do you like?
Well, the best player in the country, maybe in the last decade, is Jeremiah Smith. He's the best player. I'm going to go through each one real quick. Arch Manning, to be determined. I said that, and I think some Texas fans got a little upset saying he's the next coming. He might be. He's really good. He's only thrown 90 passes, and he had 9 touchdowns, 2 picks. So the quiet guy that really, Klubnik of Clemson, he had 36 touchdowns throwing last year, and he's back. And you've seen steady improvement from him as a quarterback. So if I had to say it's only plus 1,200, Arch Manning's number one at plus 700 as far as the betting. I'm going to say Jeremiah Smith's going to be the first receiver in a while to win the Heisman Trophy.
Wow. 4 wide receivers have won the Heisman, right? Tim Brown at Notre Dame, right. Desmond Howard at that program up north, Devontae Smith, and of course, Travis Hunter last season. Although Travis, I think he won it not just because he was a wide receiver, because he was just, an excellent defensive player as well. Just to go back to Arch at plus 700, as you mentioned, doesn't have the numbers, certainly has the name, has the pedigree. I go back to this statement that Heismans are won in November. Texas, obviously they open up the season in Columbus against the defending champs, Ohio State, but they close November with Georgia, and then they host Arkansas and Texas A&M. So those are 3 games you can win a Heisman with. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. The Tigers open up at the Tigers. Clemson in August against Cade Klubnik, and that might be Clemson's marquee game of the season. They don't have Miami on their schedule this year. They do host SMU and Florida State and close at South Carolina. Jeremiah Smith, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns. I think a lot of us think he's just the best player in college football. And it's interesting, Coach, because, Travis Hunter was the best player in college football last year, we all felt. And that conversation was able to maintain itself throughout the year. And Colorado had a good enough season. And the guy was doing enough spectacular plays on both sides of the ball that conversation was able to carry on. Jeremiah Smith was just shut out of a couple games because defenses just said, we can't let him beat us.
Right.
And again, the problem with the question with Smith is who's going to be his quarterback. Julian Sayin, Lincoln Kineholz, the freshman, Tavian St. Clair, all in the competition right now. Sayin appears to be the leader right now. Spring will have a lot to say.
I will say this though, for everyone to understand though, as important as that quarterback is, that is number one. But who's the Emeka on the other side?
Yeah.
You can take away a good receiver.
Good.
You can't take away two. When I had Lewis Murphy, Percy Harvin, when I had Terry McLaurin, Michael Thomas, you can't take away two because you can't rotate the coverage. So will Carnett develop enough to be to take the heat off of Jeremiah? Because once again, you saw it. You can take away a good receiver.
Right.
You can't.
I think Tate will be good enough. Also, be questioned who takes over at running back as well for Ohio State,
Absolutely.
right? They lost their two-headed monster, and that obviously takes a lot of pressure off of quarterbacks and wide receivers. And of course, the last one, Drew Allar at Penn State, plus 1,300, threw for over 3,300 yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, able to rush it, though, 6 scores, 302 rushing yards. And again, the story about Penn State, can they win the big one? They are bringing a lot of guys back, a la what Ohio State did last season. And that's going to be a big talking point through the course of the offseason and the early stages of college football in the fall.